One final video this week on the political and economic reforms carried out by Diocletian. Diocletian realizes that the empire is too big and facing too many challenges across different fronts to be governed by one man. And so he institutes a new form of government called the tetrarchy, which means the rule of four. And so this is what's going to replace what we had with the Principate, which is an emperor governing, working together with a senate and an army. Now we're going to have four emperors, two senior emperors, each with the title of Augustus, one in the east and one in the west, and then two junior emperors who serve under them, who are called Caesars, one in the east and one in the west. Each emperor had their own army with them, as well as border troops, and so the idea was that if you got an army with you, it's less likely to be a military coup. Diocletian moves the capital of the empire to the east. He becomes the senior emperor of the east, and he moves the capital from Rome to Nicomedia. This can be pretty counterintuitive for a lot of people. So why is the capital of the Roman Empire not in Rome? And the answer is that by this point, Rome has become impoverished. The western half of the Roman Empire was especially affected by the population decline linked with the smallpox outbreak of the 2nd century. So Rome has become poor. It's also become very corrupt, and it's also in a difficult place to defend. On the other hand, the eastern regions of the empire have more wealth, have always had more wealth, have bigger armies, and have more stability. And so Diocletian is restabilizing the empire around this eastern core, these provinces in Greece and Anatolia, Syria, and Egypt that are wealthier and more intact than the provinces in Germany and France and Italy that people have been fighting over for decades at this point. So by doing this, Diocletian is able to strengthen the empire against external invaders. And he's also able to strengthen the empire by limiting the number of military coups. And so now he could turn his attention to the empire's economic problems. Remember that the silver coinage of the empire was worthless, and tax revenues are barely meeting the empire's expenses. And so Diocletian initially tried issuing new coins, but no one really trusted that these coins had the value that the government claimed. Then Diocletian tried to establish price controls to curb inflation. This never works throughout the history of economics. It doesn't work because it means that goods are just sold on the black market for what people are really willing to pay at the time, and government revenue drops further. Government money becomes worth less. Diocletian responds by reorganizing the empire and establishing a more unified system of tax and revenue. So the Romans had just kind of adopted the tax systems of the different provinces that they conquered as they conquered them, or they'd established rates based on the financial situation of the empire at the time. And so Diocletian holds the first census for about a century. That's pretty mind-blowing to imagine. Can you imagine if all the seats in the House in the American Congress were awarded based on population density from 1920? We'd be living in a totally different world. And so the Romans haven't had a census for 100 years. And so this census is designed to determine who are the populations of the empire, what resources do they have, what rates of tax should we levy, and to standardize these rates of tax across the empire. Diocletian also made provinces, he created more provinces, he made the provinces smaller so they would be easier to control. He established an amount of revenue that each province needed to provide to the empire, and he made the wealthiest inhabitants within those provinces responsible for raising the revenues. And perhaps unsurprisingly, the amount of revenue improves. So Diocletian is making the structure through which the Roman Empire is bringing in revenue. He's making that more consistent. And then at the same time, he approaches the lack of value in the currency in a constructive way by allowing people to pay their taxes either in coin or in kind. So if you're a farmer, you don't have to pay in coin, you can pay in grain or in cattle. This is great for a couple of reasons. First, it sets a value for the currency. It establishes that if you have a cow, you can pay with that cow, or you can pay 5 silver coins, and now you know what a silver coin is worth. On the other hand, it also means the empire is receiving stuff real stuff that actually has value rather than worthless money. So at least the government now has food that they can use to pay the soldiers and the army. And so in this way, Diocletian is going to refinance the empire at the same time as making it more politically stable and more militarily protected. And so this means that the Roman Empire is going to survive the 3rd century crisis. But with a new core in the East, a new Eastern focus. And so this will change the ongoing history of the empire that we'll talk about next week.